There are moments in life that arrive without warning, moments that shatter everything we thought we knew about our carefully constructed worlds. For Principal Victoria Chen, that moment came on a Thursday afternoon in May during what should have been just another school talent show. What she witnessed on that stage would force her to confront a secret she had buried for 23 years, a decision that had haunted her every single day since she made it, and a truth so impossible that even she struggled to believe it was real. The gymnasium of Riverside Elementary was packed that afternoon. Parents filled the bleachers, phones held high to capture every precious second of their children's performances. The air buzzed with excitement, that particular energy that only comes when proud families gather to celebrate their kids. Teachers lined the walls, some helping nervous students backstage, others managing the growing crowd. It was the annual Spring Talent Show, an event Victoria had organized dozens of times during her 15 years as principal of the school. Victoria sat in her usual spot, front row center, clipboard in hand. She had watched juggling acts, heard off-key singing, witnessed magic tricks that didn't quite work. She smiled and applauded each child with genuine warmth. This was why she had dedicated her life to education. To be part of these moments, to help shape young lives. What she didn't know was that the next performance would destroy the careful walls she had built around her past. The assistant principal, Margaret Sullivan, approached the microphone. Our next performer is Emma Richardson, a fifth grader who will be sharing an original spoken word piece about family. Victoria glanced at her program. Emma Richardson. She knew the girl, of course. Bright student, kind to others, always turned in her homework on time. The daughter of Michael and Sarah Richardson, both respected members of the community. Emma walked onto the stage, and Victoria felt something shift in her chest, though she couldn't have explained why. The girl wore a simple white dress, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked nervous, her hands clasped in front of her. Then she began to speak. "This is called The Lullaby I Never Knew I Knew," Emma said, her voice small but clear. And then she started reciting her piece. Words about being adopted, about wondering where she came from, about a melody that lived somewhere deep in her memory, a song she couldn't remember learning but somehow knew by heart. As she spoke, she began to hum softly between verses. The melody was simple, haunting, just a few bars repeated. Victoria's clipboard clattered to the floor. The sound echoed through the gym, but she didn't notice. Every muscle in her body had gone rigid. Her face, usually composed and professional, had gone completely pale. The humming, that specific melody, it was the lullaby she used to sing, the one her own mother had sung to her, the one she had sung to her baby during those 3 precious days in the hospital before signing the adoption papers. But it wasn't just the song. As Emma turned slightly, gesturing with her hand during her recitation, she saw it, there, on the inside of Emma's left wrist, a birthmark shaped like a small crescent moon. Victoria's hand instinctively went to her own wrist, hidden beneath her blazer, where an identical mark had always been. The world seemed to tilt. Victoria gripped the edge of her seat, her knuckles white. Her breathing became shallow, rapid. Margaret, sitting beside her, leaned over with concern. "Victoria? Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Victoria couldn't respond. Her mind was racing through impossible calculations. 23 years ago. The adoption agency in Portland, the closed adoption, no contact, no information exchanged, the baby girl she had held for 72 hours before handing her over, promising herself she would never try to find her, that she had given up that right. And now, here, in her own school, performing on her stage was a girl with her birthmark, singing her lullaby, talking about being adopted. Emma finished her piece to enthusiastic applause. She smiled, relieved, and started to walk off the stage. Victoria suddenly stood up so abruptly that several parents turned to look at her. Margaret grabbed her arm. "Victoria, what's wrong?" Victoria's voice, when it finally came, was barely more than a whisper, but it carried an urgency that made Margaret's eyes widen. "Find Emma. Right now. Take her to my office. Do not let anyone speak to her, not other students, not teachers, not even her parents if they try to approach. Tell them there's an urgent matter I need to discuss with her privately. Go. Now." Margaret had worked with Victoria for 8 years and had never seen her like this. The principal was always measured, always in control, but the woman standing before her now was trembling, her eyes wild with something that looked like panic mixed with disbelief. "Victoria, I don't understand. What's happening?" "Please, Margaret, trust me. This is critical. Keep her in my office until I get there. 5 minutes. I need 5 minutes." Victoria's hand was shaking as she pressed it against her forehead. Around them, the next performer was being introduced, but Victoria heard none of it. Margaret nodded slowly and hurried toward the backstage area. Victoria remained standing, watching Emma's father, Michael Richardson, in the bleachers. He was smiling, clapping, so proud of his daughter. He had no idea that his world was about to implode. Neither did Emma. Neither did anyone in this gymnasium. But Victoria knew, with a certainty that terrified her, that everything was about to change. She forced herself to walk, each step measured toward the exit. She needed to get to her office before she collapsed. Her mind was already spinning through the implications, the ethical violations, the conflict of interest, the fact that she had been this child's principal for 2 years without knowing, the questions that would come, the scrutiny. But more than any of that, the overwhelming, crushing weight of recognition. After 23 years of wondering, of deliberately not searching, of convincing herself that her daughter was better off without her, fate had placed that child directly in her path. As she reached the gymnasium doors, she paused and looked back one more time. Emma had rejoined her father in the bleachers, and Michael was ruffling her hair affectionately while she laughed. A perfect moment between father and daughter. Victoria felt something break inside her chest. She had given up the right to those moments. She had made her choice, signed the papers, walked away. And now here was the universe, throwing it all back in her face. She pushed through the doors and hurried down the empty hallway toward her office, her heels clicking against the linoleum. Behind her, she could still hear the muffled sounds of the talent show continuing. Life going on, normal and unchanged for everyone else. But for Victoria Chen, nothing would ever be normal again. 23 years. Victoria's mind traveled back as she walked, back to a version of herself that she had tried so hard to forget. She had been 22 years old, fresh out of college with her teaching degree, filled with idealism and dreams of changing the world one student at a time. She had landed her first teaching position at a high school in Portland, Oregon, thrilled to finally be starting her career. That's where she met Daniel Harriman. He was the vice principal, 35 years old, charismatic, intelligent, and, tragically, married with 2 young children. She knew it was wrong from the first moment he smiled at her in the teacher's lounge. She knew it was a betrayal of her own values, of his family, of everything she believed in. But she was young and naive, and he made her feel special, chosen, important. The affair lasted 6 months. They were careful, or so they thought. Secret meetings, late nights at school when everyone else had gone home, one disastrous weekend at a cabin 2 hours away where they both pretended they could have a normal relationship. She told herself it wasn't hurting anyone, that they would figure it out, that maybe he would leave his wife. All the lies that people tell themselves when they're doing something they know is destroying them. She found out she was pregnant on a Tuesday in November. She was standing in her tiny apartment bathroom, staring at the test, watching her entire future crumble. She called Daniel immediately, her voice shaking. His response was everything she should have expected, but somehow hadn't. Panic, anger, and immediate distancing. He told her he couldn't leave his family, that this would ruin his career, his children's lives, his marriage. He offered money for an abortion, then became cold when she said she needed time to think. By Friday, Daniel had stopped taking her calls. By the following Monday, she learned he had gone to the school board and requested a transfer to another district, citing family reasons. He left Portland without saying goodbye, without another word to Victoria. She was alone, pregnant, and her teaching career was just beginning. If anyone found out about the affair, she would be finished before she started. Victoria remembered those dark months with painful clarity. The morning sickness she hid from her colleagues, the baggy clothes she wore to conceal her growing belly, the loneliness of going to doctor's appointments by herself, lying to the nurses about the baby's father, saying he was deployed overseas. The decision she wrestled with every single day. She couldn't raise this child alone. Not at 22, not on a first-year teacher's salary, not while trying to build a career. She couldn't tell her parents, conservative immigrants who had sacrificed everything to give her opportunities. The shame would destroy them. She couldn't reach out to Daniel. He had made his position clear. So she made the hardest decision of her life. She would carry the baby to term, give birth, and place the child adoption through a reputable agency that promised closed adoptions, clean breaks, the best possible homes. She told herself it was the right thing to do, that she was giving this child a chance at a better life than she could provide. Victoria hadn't thought about it from that perspective. The idea of Emma someday learning the truth and feeling betrayed, feeling like Victoria had hidden from her, was almost worse than the current pain. "You think I should tell them? The Richardsons?" Margaret hesitated. "I think you need to talk to a lawyer first, understand your legal obligations and protections. But yes, I think they deserve to know. This isn't just about you, Victoria. This is about 3 people, Emma and her parents, who have a right to make informed decisions about their own lives. And honestly, keeping this secret while continuing to be Emma's principal feels ethically impossible. Every interaction you have with her from now on will be colored by this knowledge. How can you maintain professional boundaries when you're looking at your daughter every day?" The truth of Margaret's words settled over Victoria like a weight. She was right. There was no going back to not knowing. The innocence of their previous principal-student relationship was shattered. Every future interaction would be loaded with this secret. And Emma deserved better than that. Her parents deserved better than that. "I think I need to resign," Victoria said quietly. "Remove myself from the situation entirely. It's the only way to avoid the conflict of interest." "That's one option," Margaret agreed. "But Victoria, think about what you'd be giving up. You've been principal here for 15 years. This school is your life. The kids adore you. The teachers respect you. Are you ready to walk away from all of that?" Victoria looked around her office at the photos of students over the years, the awards on the walls, the hand-drawn pictures from kindergartners taped to her filing cabinet. This school was her redemption, her purpose, the thing she had built to make up for the daughter she gave away. Leaving would feel like losing everything twice over. "I don't know what I'm ready for," Victoria admitted. "All I know is that nothing will ever be the same again." They sat in heavy silence for a moment. Then Margaret spoke again, practical as always. "Okay, here's what I think you need to do. First, contact a lawyer who specializes in adoption and education law. Understand your rights and obligations. Second, you need to decide whether to tell the Richardsons, and if so, how and when. Third, regardless of what you decide about disclosure, you need to document everything and possibly recuse yourself from any future decisions involving Emma. And fourth, you need to take care of yourself. Victoria, this is traumatic. You're dealing with grief, shock, guilt, and 100 other emotions. You can't make good decisions if you're falling apart." Victoria managed a weak smile. "When did you become so wise?" "I learned from the best. From you. And that's why I know you'll figure this out. It won't be easy, but you'll find the right path." Victoria wanted to believe her, but in that moment she couldn't see any path that didn't lead to pain. Someone was going to get hurt in this situation. Either she kept the secret and lived with the ethical violation and personal anguish, or she revealed the truth and potentially disrupted Emma's life and destroyed her own career. There was no good option, no clean solution. "Can you cover for me for the rest of the day? I need to go home, think, maybe talk to a lawyer if I can find one who'll take a call this late. Tell everyone I had a family emergency." Margaret nodded. "Of course, go. And Victoria, call me tonight if you need to talk. Anytime, I mean it." Victoria stood on shaky legs, gathered her things, and left her office through the back exit to avoid the crowds from the talent show that were now dispersing. She could hear parents and students in the hallways, happy chatter and laughter, normal life continuing while hers spun out of control. She made it to her car before the next wave of tears hit. She sat in the parking lot crying so hard she could barely breathe, mourning everything she had lost 23 years ago and everything she stood to lose now. The daughter she gave up, the daughter she found, the career she built, the peace she had finally found. As she finally pulled herself together enough to drive home, one thought kept circling through her mind. Emma hummed that lullaby because it made her feel safe, like someone who loved her had taught it to her. She didn't remember Victoria, couldn't remember those 3 days, but some part of her had held on to that song, that connection, that love. Maybe, Victoria thought as she turned out of the parking lot, maybe that was enough. Maybe knowing that Emma was happy and loved was all she deserved to have. Maybe the right thing to do was to walk away again, just like she had 23 years ago, and let Emma continue her life without the disruption of knowing her biological mother had been in her life all along. But even as she thought it, she knew it wasn't that simple. Because now Michael Richardson had seen Margaret pull Emma aside. He had noticed Victoria's strange behavior during the performance. He was probably worried, asking questions. And Michael Richardson, from everything Victoria knew about him, was not the type of man to let something like this go. Her phone rang as if on cue. Unknown number. Victoria almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Miss Chen, this is Michael Richardson. I'm sorry to bother you outside of school hours, but I need to speak with you about what happened today. I know something upset you during Emma's performance, and I need to understand what it was. Can we meet? Victoria closed her eyes, gripping the steering wheel. Here it was, the moment of decision. She could deflect, make excuses, maintain the secret. Or she could reveal the truth and let the chips fall where they may. Mr. Richardson, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Yes, we need to talk. But not on the phone, and not with Emma present. This is complicated and sensitive, and it involves information about Emma's adoption. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Her adoption? How would you know anything about her adoption? It was closed, completely sealed. I know, Victoria said, because I'm the one who gave her up. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria could hear Michael's breathing, rapid and shocked. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely more than a whisper. What did you just say? I'm Emma's biological mother, Victoria repeated, the words feeling surreal even as she spoke them. I didn't know until today. I had no idea she was at my school. The adoption was closed, and I never searched. But during her performance, I saw her birthmark and heard the lullaby, and I knew. Mr. Richardson, I know this is shocking and frightening, but I need you to understand that I never intended for any of this to happen. I need to explain everything, but I need to do it in person, and you need to hear me out before making any decisions. Michael was quiet for so long that Victoria thought he might have hung up. Finally, he spoke, his voice tight with controlled emotion. My wife needs to be part of this conversation. Can we meet tonight, our house, after Emma goes to bed? Yes, Victoria said. Text me your address. I'll be there at 9. They hung up without another word. Victoria sat in her car, staring at her phone, trying to process what had just happened. She had just told a stranger, a parent of one of her students, that she was his daughter's biological mother. There was no taking it back now. The secret was out, and whatever happened next was beyond her control. She drove home slowly, her mind replaying the conversation over and over. Sarah's unexpected kindness, Michael's understandable protectiveness, the weight of decisions that hadn't been made yet but that loomed over all of them like a storm cloud. When she got home, she called Margaret and told her everything that had happened. Margaret listened without interrupting, then spoke carefully. Victoria, I think you should still talk to a lawyer. Even if the Richardsons seem reasonable now, this situation could change quickly. You need to understand your legal position and protect yourself. I will, Victoria promised. Tomorrow. Tonight, I just need to sit with all of this. She hung up and sat in her dark living room looking at the photos on her wall. Pictures of students over the years, graduation ceremonies, school events. Her life in images all focused on other people's children because she couldn't have her own. Except she had, once, for 3 days. And now that child was back in her life in the most impossible way imaginable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Richardson. "Thank you for being honest with us. We will be in touch soon. For what it's worth, I believe you when you say you didn't know. This is hard for everyone, but we'll find a way through it." Victoria read the message 3 times, feeling something loosen in her chest. She wasn't alone in this. The Richardsons were scared and confused, but they weren't shutting her out completely. There was still a chance, however slim, that they could navigate the situation without destroying Emma's sense of safety and family. She replied simply, "Thank you. Emma is lucky to have you as her parents. I mean that." As she finally got ready for bed, Victoria made a decision. Tomorrow, she would call a lawyer, understand her options and obligations. She would talk to Margaret about how to handle things at school. She would document everything, create a paper trail showing that she was recusing herself from decisions about Emma. She would do everything right, by the book, ethical and professional. But tonight, just for tonight, she would let herself feel it all. The grief of giving up her daughter, the shock of fighting her again, the terror of potentially losing her job and reputation, the impossible hope that maybe, somehow, there was a way forward that didn't require more loss and more pain. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in 23 years, she let herself sing the lullaby out loud. The same melody Emma had hummed on stage, the same tune she had sung in that hospital room all those years ago. It felt like a bridge between past and present, between the mother she had been for 3 days and the stranger she was now. And somewhere across town, Emma Richardson was probably sleeping peacefully, unaware that her world was balanced on the edge of a revelation that would change it forever. The next morning, Victoria woke with a sense of grim determination. She had spent the night alternating between fitful sleep and staring at the ceiling, but dawn brought clarity of purpose. She called into school and told Margaret she needed a personal day to handle the situation. Margaret understood immediately and promised to cover for her. Victoria's first call was to an attorney who specialized in adoption and education law, someone Margaret had recommended. His name was Robert Castellano, and he had 40 years of experience navigating the complex intersection of family law and professional ethics. His secretary scheduled an emergency consultation for that afternoon. Victoria spent the morning preparing, gathering every document she had related to the adoption, her employment history, Emma's school records, notes from her conversation with the Richardsons. She needed Castellano to understand the full scope of the situation. The law office was downtown, occupying the 10th floor of a glass building with a view of the city. Castellano himself was in his mid-60s, with gray hair and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He listened to Victoria's story without interrupting, taking occasional notes, his expression giving away nothing. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Ms. Chen, I'm going to be brutally honest with you. You're in a very precarious position, both professionally and legally." Victoria's stomach dropped. How precarious? "Let's start with the professional side," said Castellano. "The moment you realized Emma was your biological daughter, you had an ethical obligation to disclose that relationship to your supervisors and the school board. Every day you continue as her principal without disclosing creates additional liability. But I only found out yesterday," Victoria protested, "and I immediately recused myself from decisions about her." "Informal recusal isn't sufficient," Castellano explained. "This needs to be formalized, documented, and approved by the school board. They need to know why you're recusing yourself. And, Ms. Chen, there's a strong argument that recusal isn't enough. The perception of conflict of interest exists whether or not you're directly involved in decisions about Emma. Other parents could argue that her presence in the school influenced your decisions in ways you weren't even aware of. Victoria felt sick. So I have to resign? Resignation is certainly one option, and possibly the cleanest one, Castellano said. But it's not the only option. You could request a transfer to another school in the district, removing the direct conflict. You could take a leave of absence while the situation is sorted. The key is that you cannot continue as Emma's principal without full disclosure to your employers. What about legally? Victoria asked. Do I have any rights regarding Emma? Castellano's expression softened slightly. Ms. Chen, when you signed those adoption papers 23 years ago, you terminated your parental rights. In the eyes of the law, you are not Emma's mother. Michael and Sarah Richardson are her parents, with all the legal and rights and responsibilities that entails. You have no legal claim to custody, visitation, or even contact with Emma unless the Richardsons voluntarily agree to it. I understand that, Victoria said. I'm not trying to claim rights I don't have. I just want to know where I stand. Where you stand is complicated, Castellano said. Closed adoptions exist for a reason, to protect all parties involved. The fact that you discovered Emma's identity accidentally doesn't change the terms of that adoption. However, the Richardsons now have information about you as well. They could choose to share that information with Emma, or they could choose to maintain the closed adoption. That's entirely their decision. What if Emma eventually wants to search for me? Victoria asked. What happens then? In this state, adoptees have the right to access their original birth certificates when they turn 18. At that point, Emma could search for you if she chooses, but until then, she's a minor, and her parents make decisions about what information she receives. Victoria absorbed this, feeling the walls close in around her. She had no rights, no say, no control over whether she would ever have a relationship with Emma beyond the professional one that was now untenable. There's another issue we need to discuss, Castellano said, his tone becoming more serious. The Richardsons could theoretically argue that your presence in Emma's life, even as her principal, represents a violation of the closed adoption agreement. They could seek legal action to prevent you from having any contact with her. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. They seemed reasonable last night. They didn't threaten anything like that. Emotions are running high right now, Castellano cautioned. People who seem reasonable in the first shock of discovery can feel very different after they've had time to think about the implications. I'm not saying the Richardsons will take legal action, but you need to understand that it's a possibility. My advice is to document everything, maintain absolute professionalism, and do nothing that could be construed as overstepping your bounds. They talked for another hour, going through various scenarios and their legal implications. By the time Victoria left the office, she felt simultaneously more informed and more helpless. The law was clear, she had given up her daughter, and that decision was final and binding. Whatever happened next was entirely up to the Richardsons. Her phone rang as she was driving home. It was Margaret. Victoria, we need to talk. Something's happened. Victoria pulled over, her heart racing. What is it? Michael Richardson came to the school this morning. He wanted to meet with me privately. He told me everything. Victoria, he said he thought it was important that you knew the full situation, given that you're my assistant principal, and I'd be making decisions about Emma in my absence. Victoria closed her eyes. She had told Michael about Margaret last night, mentioned that Margaret knew about the situation. Of course he would want to verify Victoria's story with someone else at the school. It was the logical thing to do. What did he say? He was very calm, very measured, Margaret reported. He said he and his wife are trying to figure out what's best for Emma, but that in the meantime, they needed to know that the school was handling things appropriately. He asked me directly if I thought you could continue as principal under these circumstances. What did you tell him? I told him the truth, that you're one of the most ethical people I've ever worked with, that you'd never let personal feelings compromise your professional judgment, but that I understood his concerns. He asked me if I would be comfortable taking over as acting principal if you needed to step back. I said yes. Victoria felt a strange mix of gratitude and grief. Margaret was handling this exactly right, but it meant the end was coming faster than Victoria had anticipated. He's going to push for my resignation, isn't he? I don't think push is the right word, Margaret said carefully. But Victoria, he made it clear that he and his wife need to know that Emma is protected, and right now, with you as principal, they don't feel she is. I understand, Victoria said. And she did. If the situations were reversed, if she were Emma's adoptive parent, she would feel exactly the same way. I'll submit my resignation letter to the school board today. Are you sure? Margaret asked. There might be other options, temporary leave, transfer, something that doesn't end your career here. Margaret, my career here ended the moment I realized who Emma was. I've just been too scared to admit it. This is the right thing to do. For Emma, for the Richardsons, and honestly, for me too. I can't look at that child every day and maintain the professional distance I need to maintain. It's not fair to anyone. They talked for a few more minutes about logistics, about how to frame the resignation, about transition plans. Margaret would become acting principal immediately, with the school board likely making it permanent by the end of the month. Victoria would take a leave of absence effective immediately, giving her time to figure out what came next. When Victoria got home, she sat down at her computer and began drafting her resignation letter. It was one of the hardest things she had ever written. She kept it brief and professional, citing personal circumstances that required her immediate departure, thanking the board for 15 years of rewarding work, expressing confidence in Margaret's ability to lead the school. Over the following weeks and months, Victoria and Emma developed a relationship that was unique and careful and beautiful. They met every few weeks, always with the Richardsons present at first, then gradually on their own as everyone became comfortable with the arrangement. They were never going to be mother and daughter in the traditional sense. That role belonged to Sarah, and Victoria never tried to claim it. But they became something else, something that didn't have a traditional name. Friends, maybe, or mentor and student, or simply two people connected by biology and circumstance who chose to know each other. Victoria found a job at a different school district, starting fresh as a vice principal, working her way back up. She threw herself into the work with the same dedication she always had, but now with a new understanding of what family meant, of the different shapes love could take. Michael and Sarah Richardson remained cautiously supportive, setting boundaries, but also recognizing that Emma benefited from knowing her origins, from having her questions answered, from understanding all the pieces of her identity. It wasn't always easy, and there were difficult conversations and hurt feelings and moments of jealousy and insecurity that they all had to work through. But they worked through them together, always putting Emma first. On Emma's 12th birthday, Victoria was invited to the party, not as a parent, but as a special guest. She watched Emma blow out candles surrounded by friends and family, watched Michael and Sarah sing to their daughter, watched Emma laugh and smile and be completely, perfectly herself. And Victoria understood, finally, what she had given Emma all those years ago. Not just life, but the right family, the right chance to become this amazing person. The cost had been devastating, but the outcome was everything she had hoped for and more. As the party wound down and guests started to leave, Emma pulled Victoria aside. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It means a lot to me that you're here." "Thank you for inviting me," Victoria replied. "Emma, I want you to know something. No matter what happens, no matter how our relationship evolves or changes, I will always be grateful that I got to know you. You've given me something I thought I lost forever." "What's that?" Emma asked. "Peace," Victoria said simply. "The knowledge that the hardest decision I ever made was the right one. That you're happy and loved and exactly where you're supposed to be." Emma smiled, that same smile that had struck Victoria so powerfully at the talent show, and hugged her again. "I'm glad you found me. Or that I found you. However it happened, I'm glad." "So am I." So am I. As Victoria drove home that night, she thought about the impossible chain of events that had led to this moment. A talent show performance, a lullaby hummed from deep memory, a birthmark passed down through generations. Fate or coincidence or divine intervention, whatever it was, it had given her back her daughter in the only way that was possible, in the only way that was right. She had lost Emma as a baby, but she had found her as a person, as the remarkable young girl she had become. It wasn't the relationship Victoria had once dreamed of during those 3 days in the hospital, but it was real and honest and built on truth rather than secrets. And sometimes, Victoria thought as she pulled into her driveway and looked up at the stars, sometimes the universe finds a way to give you exactly what you need, even if it's not what you expected, even if it comes 23 years late. The story of Victoria Chen and Emma Richardson wasn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending. It was messy and complicated and full of difficult emotions and challenging questions that didn't always have clear answers. But it was real. And in its reality, in its honest acknowledgement of pain and loss alongside healing and connection, it was also a story of hope. Hope that second chances are possible, hope that the choices we make, even the impossible ones, can lead to good outcomes, even if they break us in the process. Hope that love finds a way, even across 23 years of separation, even through closed adoption papers and sealed records and all the barriers we put up to protect ourselves from pain. Victoria never forgot the cost of the choice she made all those years ago, but she also never forgot the gift she had been given in return, the chance to know that her daughter was thriving, to be part of her life in whatever small way Emma needed, to finally close the circle that began on March 15th, 23 years ago. And on quiet nights, when the world was still, Victoria would sometimes hum that old lullaby, the one her grandmother taught her mother, and her mother taught her, and she taught Emma, in 3 desperate days of love and goodbye. The song that Emma carried in her heart without knowing why, the song that ultimately brought them back together. Some connections, Victoria learned, are too strong to be severed by paperwork and time and good intentions. Some bonds persist despite everything we do to sever them. And sometimes, when the universe decides it's time, those bonds find a way to manifest again, transformed but unbroken, teaching us that love is more complex and more resilient than we ever imagined possible. This is the story of a principal who watched her daughter's performance and froze, unable to process the impossible truth unfolding before her. This is the story of a choice made in desperation that led to exactly the outcome hoped for. This is the story of 3 people learning to build a bridge across an impossible divide, finding a way to honor both the past and the present, both biology and the family bonds that really matter. This is a story about loss and love and the unbearable weight of impossible decisions. But more than that, it's a story about what happens after those decisions, about the long road of living with them, and about the grace that can come when truth finally finds its way into the light. What would you do if you were faced with an impossible choice like Victoria's? Would you have told the truth, knowing it could disrupt a child's life? Would you have kept the secret, living with the pain of it every day? And if you were Michael and Sarah, could you have found it in your hearts to let your daughter know her biological mother, despite the fear and uncertainty that comes with that openness? These are questions without easy answers, situations where every choice has a cost. But they're also opportunities to examine what family really means, what love requires of us, and how we navigate the messy, complicated reality of human relationships. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the choices we make and the ripples they create through time, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about your own experiences with adoption, with impossible choices, with the unexpected ways the past can intersect with the present. Your perspective matters, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that explored the depths of human experience, the complexity of family bonds, and the unexpected ways life surprises us. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload because these stories, these real examinations of what it means to be human, they're the conversations we need to be having. And before you go, check out our next recommended video where we explore another true story that will challenge everything you think you know about the choices we make and the consequences that follow us through life. Click that video now because the conversation continues and your understanding of what's possible in human relationships is about to expand. Remember, life is rarely as simple as we want it to be, but it's in that complexity, in those impossible situations where there's no clear right answer, that we discover who we really are and what we're capable of. Victoria Chen found that out on a Thursday afternoon in May when a lullaby changed everything. What will your moment be?